Have you ever sat at a family dinner, looked around the table at the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, and realized you're nothing more than a prop in their play? A convenient villain for their story. 3 years ago, I learned that lesson. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was an awakening. This is the story of how my world burned down and how I rose from the ashes stronger than ever. 4 years ago, my wife Chloe decided to treat Thanksgiving dinner like it was the season finale of some trashy reality show. I was 29 then, a few years into a marriage, blissfully unaware that the turkey wasn't the only thing about to get roasted. Now Chloe, she'd always had a flair for the dramatic, but that morning seemed normal enough. She was in the kitchen, humming off key and working on the side dishes like some Food Network star with a grudge, while I wrestled with the 20-pound turkey like it had personally wronged me. My parents were hosting as usual, so the house was packed. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, about 15 people total, all ready for overeating and passive-aggressive commentary about politics. Enter Liam, my brother, the family golden boy. He'd always been better looking, more charming, and somehow managed to make accidentally failing upward into an Olympic sport. Growing up, he was the son, and I was the guy getting second-degree burns just by existing near him. I remember when we were kids, he broke our dad's antique watch, and within an hour, I was grounded for leaving it where he could find it. But as adults, I thought we'd put the competition behind us. Spoiler alert, nope. Fast forward to noon, everyone's seated, glasses clinking, conversations buzzing. Then Chloe walks into the dining room, carrying the turkey on a platter. But not just any turkey, no, she'd put sunglasses on it, like the bird was about to release a summer single. People laughed nervously. My dad squinted like he was trying to figure out if it was a joke or a cry for help. I thought maybe she'd had one too many mimosas. Then she cleared her throat, loudly, the kind of throat clearing that means, "Attention, peasants," she said. "I have a surprise for everyone, especially Ethan." "Oh boy," my uncle muttered, already reaching for more wine. I smiled awkwardly, trying to play along. "What is it, Chloe? Did the turkey get into law school?" Not a laugh. Not even a pity chuckle. She wasn't joking. She launched into this speech about how she'd been unhappy for months, how I never satisfied her needs, and how she'd found someone who actually knew what to do. The room went dead silent. Forks hovered mid-air. My grandmother looked like she was about to faint into the mashed potatoes. "Chloe," I said, blinking in disbelief, "are you seriously doing this between the green bean casserole and the cranberry sauce?" She didn't even flinch. Everyone deserves to know the truth. And right then, as I was still trying to process the fact that my marriage had just been nuked in front of my entire bloodline, Liam strolled in from the kitchen, shirtless, with this smug grin on his face. Liam looked me dead in the eye, the kind of look you'd expect from a man announcing he'd just cured cancer, and said, "I'm sorry, Ethan. But Chloe made it clear I filled the plate better than you ever could." "Yeah, filled the plate." He actually said that. The sexual innuendo hit the table harder than the turkey platter, and not a single person missed it. My mother, my own mother, cackled like a hyena and said, "Well, it's about time. Someone in this family knew how to please a woman." I nearly dropped my fork. "Thanks, Mum." Nothing says maternal support like applauding your son's wife for sleeping with his brother. Really warms the heart. But before I could even blink, my grandmother leaned in with her pearls rattling, said, "Oh, don't feel bad, Ethan. Your grandfather had the same problem, never could satisfy anyone properly." Great. So now erectile dysfunction apparently skips generations like some kind of cursed family heirloom. And then, oh, the pièce de résistance, my father. the man who taught me to ride a bike, the man who once grounded me for getting a C in algebra, shrugged like I'd just spilled soda on the rug and said, "You should have seen it coming, Ethan. You were never much of a man anyway." The whole table exploded. 15 people, flesh and blood, people I'd spent every Christmas and 4th of July with, laughing like they were at a comedy club. Pointing, nodding, agreeing. My humiliation was the Thanksgiving special. I sat there, motionless, for maybe 30 seconds. Just enough time for the gravy boat to make its way around. Then, very calmly, I poured gravy onto my plate, looked up, and said, "Don't worry. By Black Friday, every single one of you will be back here begging like dogs." Cue more laughter, louder, meaner this time. "Loser!" someone shouted. "Delusional," another chimed in. It was like a family choir of mockery. Here's what they didn't know. I'd been preparing for this. Not this exact circus act, but something like it. I always had this gut feeling Liam would try to take something important from me. He'd been doing it since we were kids. First toys, then girls, now apparently wives. The man was a parasite in designer jeans. So for the past 2 years, I'd been quietly collecting receipts. Not literal grocery receipts, though God knows Liam couldn't even manage those, but documentation. Every shady family financial arrangement, every loan my parents had slipped him, every business deal he'd botched and my father had swooped in to fix. See, our family isn't billionaire rich, but we're comfortable enough that screwing it up takes real talent. My grandfather built a successful construction business that my father expanded. Liam had been handed chance after chance to prove himself in the family business, and every single time he managed to screw it up in spectacular fashion. Honestly, if failure were an Olympic sport, he'd have more gold medals than Michael Phelps. Meanwhile, I was quietly climbing the ladder at a competing firm, building my own reputation, my own client base, and unlike Liam, actually delivering results. It was like watching a soap opera, one brother burning bridges, the other building them. Guess which one my parents kept rooting for? After the Thanksgiving circus, I didn't storm out, flip the table, or start throwing cranberry sauce like confetti. No, I finished my meal, ate the damn turkey, even helped clear the dishes. Let them think they'd won some grand victory. Then I drove home alone. Chloe stayed behind with Liam, probably planning a celebratory stuffing of their own. That night I got to work. First call. Noah, my business partner. We'd been flirting with the idea of breaking off and starting our own company for months. I said, "Noah, it's time. Fire up the engines." He didn't even hesitate. Second call. 3 of my father's biggest clients. Not stolen clients, let's be clear, but ones I'd been cultivating relationships with for years. I didn't pitch them. I just said, "Hey, big change is coming. Might be worth keeping your options open." They didn't need much convincing. Third call, my lawyer. I wasn't about to let Chloe take me for half of everything after humiliating me in front of 15 relatives and a turkey with sunglasses. Papers were drawn up faster than you could say irreconcilable differences. Within a week, I'd moved out of the house Chloe and I shared, filed for divorce, and put our business plan into motion. And let me tell you, I knew exactly which clients were already sick of my father's company and which projects Liam had left smoldering in flames. Take the Morrison account, for example, worth about $200,000 annually. Liam convinced Dad he could handle it, then promised the client a renovation timeline so ridiculous it may as well have included teleportation. 2 major deadlines missed, 0 accountability, and a client ready to chew through steel in frustration. I'd been watching this train wreck like it was must-see TV. By the time Christmas rolled around, Noah and I had officially launched our new company, and by New Year's we'd already locked down 4 major contracts, including the Morrison account. Honestly, Liam made it so easy, it felt like cheating on a test where the teacher left the answer key taped to the board. We didn't have to badmouth the family business at all. The clients were practically running to us with open arms. But here's where it gets interesting. About 6 weeks after the Great Thanksgiving betrayal, I started getting texts from Liam. Not apologies, not explanations, just random crap like, "Hey man, how's it going?" and "Want to grab drinks sometime?" Yeah, because nothing says, "Sorry I stole your wife and humiliated you in front of the family," like a casual beer invite. I ignored every single one. Then Chloe started calling me, except she was too cowardly to use her own phone, so I get calls from random numbers, probably borrowing Liam's phone or maybe using the landline at my parents' house between yoga stretches. Straight to voicemail they went. The messages escalated quickly. First it was calm, then it was weepy desperation. One voicemail had her sniffling, "Ethan, please, I made a huge mistake. Can we just talk? We can fix this." Sure, because nothing says fixable like Thanksgiving dinner turning into an X-rated Jerry Springer episode. Meanwhile, my business was on fire, in the good way. Noah and I had hired 2 more contractors, and our schedule was packed through the summer. Every signed contract, every happy client felt like a middle finger to Liam and the rest of the family. Still, I wasn't popping champagne yet. Deep down, I knew this was just the opening act. Then came March, and my mother called. Against my better judgment, I actually answered. I wanted to see how far the delusion went. She started sweet as pie. "Ethan, darling, why haven't you been coming to family gatherings? Everyone misses you." I laughed so hard I almost dropped the phone. "Gee, Mum, maybe it has something to do with Thanksgiving when the family turned into a live studio audience for my public execution." Immediately she got defensive. "Oh, Ethan, you're being dramatic. It was just a little family teasing. You've always been so sensitive." That's when it hit me. They really didn't get it. They genuinely thought it was harmless fun, like making jokes about my haircut or my taste in music. In their minds, watching my wife leave me for my brother mid-dinner was just another round of "ha ha ha, Ethan's a loser." They couldn't comprehend that this time was different, that there would be actual nuclear-level consequences. By April, the divorce finalized. Chloe, ever the optimist, tried to claw her way into alimony and half my business's value, but I'd been careful, separating every financial thread like a surgeon. The company was untouchable. She walked away with basically nothing except the house, which she couldn't afford on her nurse practitioner's salary. By summer, karma finally RSVP'd. Liam and Chloe's relationship went down in flames, and not even in an exciting way. Just pathetic screaming matches and late-night phone calls I pretended not to listen to. Word eventually got around that she'd been cheating on him too, with some guy from her yoga class. The family business was circling the drain faster than last year's fruitcake. They'd lost several major accounts, and shockingly, Liam's skills hadn't magically leveled up overnight. Who knew that the guy who thought Excel was just fancy graph paper couldn't manage multi-million-dollar projects? That's when the begging began. And remember how I said Liam and Chloe's relationship imploded? Oh, it got better. Turns out she wasn't just hooking up with the yoga instructor. No, she was also running up credit card debt like it was her cardio routine. Somehow, genius boy Liam ended up co-signing something for her, and she maxed it out before pulling a Houdini and vanishing with Yoga Dude to Colorado, because apparently nothing screams fresh start like mountains and crippling debt. By July, Liam was crawling back to my parents' house, broke, humiliated, and probably still shirtless. The family golden boy had officially lost his shine, and suddenly everyone was noticing the tarnish. My father, Mr. "You're not much of a man anyway," had to face the uncomfortable truth. Liam had single-handedly lost 3 major clients in 6 months and gutted a quarter of their annual revenue. Bravo, brother, bravo. The first real contact came in August. I was in the middle of pitching to a potential client who storms into the waiting area, but my mother, she waltzed in like she was the Queen of England, demanding to see me immediately. Noah, God bless him, handled it like a pro, calmly said, "Ethan's in an important meeting. You can schedule an appointment like everyone else." She didn't like that answer. So she sat in the lobby for 2 hours. 2 whole hours. Like she was auditioning for a role as a decorative plant. When I finally came out, she launched into her speech, the whole 9 yards about family, sticking together, and me being childish for holding grudges. I let her ramble for a good 5 minutes, nodding occasionally like she was giving a TED talk on how to ignore reality. Then I cut in and asked, "Do you actually remember what you said to me at Thanksgiving dinner? And you'll never believe this." She tried to gaslight me, swore up and down it was harmless joking, that I was being too sensitive. I said, Well, congratulations, Mum. Your idea of harmless joking just cost your family business several major contracts and a son." She got flustered, of course, started tripping over her words, saying maybe they'd been too harsh, that Liam was having a hard time. "Too little, too late, Mum. You don't get to hand me a public execution and then send a Hallmark apology afterward." But the real desperation didn't kick in until September. That's when Liam started texting me again. And not the casual, "Hey bro, wanna grab a beer?" garbage from before. No, these were novels. Long rambling paragraphs about how sorry he was, how he'd made a huge mistake, how Chloe had manipulated him and he never meant to hurt me, classic Liam. The man could burn down a building while holding a gas can and still swear someone else handed him the matches. The texts kept escalating. Whole dissertations on how the family business was circling the drain, how my father was even considering selling, and the cherry on top? He kept emphasizing how we used to be close as kids, and how he'd always looked up to me. Sure, Liam, nothing says admiration, like stealing your brother's wife in front of everyone. Pure manipulation, but I'll admit it gave me a peek at just how bad things had gotten for them. Then came the phone calls. At first I ignored them, but Liam's nothing, if not persistent. He'd call at random hours, usually drunk, slurring his way through self-pity speeches about how he'd ruined his life. One particularly pathetic October night, he let it all spill.
"Ethan," he moaned, "Chloe destroyed me. My credit's trashed, my confidence is gone, and my mum and dad barely talk to me anymore." I almost felt bad. Almost, but then he kept going. Said mother spent her days whining about how I'd abandoned the family. And then my favorite part, he tried to blame me. "If you hadn't started your own company," he slurred, "the clients wouldn't have had anywhere else to go." I couldn't help laughing. "No, Liam, they left because of you. Morrison alone was 6 weeks behind schedule when they fired you. Don't pin that disaster on me." By Halloween, the comedy show reached its climax. My father finally swallowed his pride and called me directly. And let me tell you, that conversation was fascinating because the man tried multiple approaches in a single phone call.
First, my father went for the classic greatest hits routine. Stern voice, full dad mode, like he was about to ground me for not mowing the lawn in 1998. He said it was time to stop the nonsense, time to be a man and come back to the family business. I couldn't help myself. I laughed out loud. That clearly wasn't in his script because there was this awkward pause, followed by him shifting gears like a desperate salesman. Suddenly it was all, "Your mother's so depressed," and Liam's in therapy, poor kid. I almost applauded the performance. From authoritarian tyrant to guilt-tripping Catholic priest in under 60 seconds. Truly versatile. When that didn't land, he tried dangling the carrot. He said they'd make me a partner, equal footing with Liam, 50-50 split. He said it like he was offering me the crown jewels instead of a rotting sandwich. I asked him if he'd forgotten the part where they all decided to roast me alive at Thanksgiving. That ship had not only sailed, it hit an iceberg, sank, and was now a tourist attraction for scuba divers. And that's when he hit me with, "You're being unreasonable. Families forgive each other." I nearly dropped the phone. Families forgive each other, sure, unless it's me they're ganging up on, then apparently forgiveness takes a holiday. Fast forward to early November. The phone rang, and for once it wasn't Liam's drunk dialing or my parents begging. It was my grandmother. Now let me remind you, this woman had practically been the MVP of the Thanksgiving humiliation parade. Hearing her voice was such a shock, it felt like getting a LinkedIn request from Darth Vader. She started crying almost immediately. "I'm so sorry, Ethan," she said, in full waterworks mode. "I've been thinking about what I said for months. Your grandfather would be ashamed of me." And then she laid it on thick. How she missed me at family dinners and how she wished things could go back to how they were. But even in her tearful apology, the manipulation was so transparent it was practically laminated. Between sobs, she kept slipping in little nuggets like, "Your poor mother is so lonely without you," and "The business just isn't the same without you." It was less an apology and more an infomercial for why Ethan should save the family empire. Limited time offer. Then came, last week, the pièce de résistance. I pulled into my apartment complex after work. And who do I find sitting on the steps like a raccoon that lost a fight with a garbage can? Liam. He'd clearly been drinking again and looked like a PSA about what happens when you mix vodka with terrible life choices. Hair a mess, clothes wrinkled, thinner than I'd ever seen him. He started rambling as soon as I got close, launching into this tragic monologue about how he'd been in love with Chloe since college, how he'd spent years being jealous of me, how he resented every success I had.
And for once, just once, I realized I was actually hearing honesty come out of Liam's mouth. The first honest thing he'd said to me in decades. He finally admitted it, flat out, no dodging, no finger-pointing for once. He said he'd been competing with me our entire lives, and that taking Chloe was supposed to prove he was better than me. Better, as if stealing my wife was some kind of Olympic event where the gold medal is ruin your brother's life. Then he dropped the real dagger. Watching my business succeed while his life fell apart made him realize he'd never actually been better at anything. He said, "I was just the favorite, Ethan, that's it. Mum and Dad made me feel like I was ahead, but I never actually was." I almost wanted to clap, not for his confession, because trust me, it was pathetic, but for the fact that it took him 30-some years, financial ruin, and a bottle of whiskey to figure out what I knew before middle school.
The conversation dragged on for over an hour. Liam was doing this exhausting back-and-forth routine. Apologize, excuse, like a bad stand-up comic who keeps bombing but refuses to leave the stage. One point, he told me Chloe had been complaining about our marriage for months before Thanksgiving. According to him, she'd basically seduced him as if she was some kind of Bond villain with a martini in one hand and a master plan in the other. He said he thought he was rescuing her from an unhappy situation. I asked, so in your mind, a rescue mission requires a public ambush at Thanksgiving dinner. What's next? Are you going to rappel from the ceiling with a grappling hook? That shut him up for about 5 seconds. Then he broke down completely. He admitted the entire Thanksgiving spectacle was Chloe's idea, that she wanted it as brutal as possible, so I wouldn't even think about trying to win her back. She told him Humiliation was the only way to seal the deal. Imagine being such a pawn that your girlfriend convinces you to nuke your entire family relationship just to make sure the ex doesn't text her on a sad Friday night. The lowest point, the part that almost made me laugh in his face, was when he asked if we could start over. "We can be brothers again," he said, all puppy-eyed. Then he pitched me his brilliant plan. We combine our companies, business partners side by side, like some kind of corporate buddy comedy. I told him he'd burned that bridge so thoroughly that even the ashes were gone. Torched, scattered, unrecognizable. If there was a bridge there once, it was now a parking lot for raccoons. Liam left that night looking completely defeated, shoulders slumped like a cartoon character who'd just walked into a rake. But I knew it wasn't the end, not with this family. Desperation was practically our love language, and they were only getting started. The holidays are creeping up again, and I can feel it. One last desperate play is coming. As I predicted, they couldn't resist making some desperate holiday play. And wow, did they deliver! It was somehow both more pathetic and more infuriating than I thought possible. See, Noah and I had just landed a monster contract in November. A residential development worth more than my father's entire annual revenue. Word travels fast in our industry, and apparently gossip moves even faster when it's about me. The second they found out, the family went from cold shoulder to full-blown sales pitch. Liam's texts went from once in a while to daily, not just the usual half-hearted "sorry bro" lines either. No, these were business proposals written like he was auditioning for Shark Tank. He kept suggesting we merge our companies, with him handling the family relationships, translation, schmoozing and screwing up while I did the actual work. The audacity was Olympic level. He genuinely thought I'd partner with someone who not only publicly humiliated me but also couldn't finish a project on time if his life depended on it. But the true escalation came 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. That's when my mother began what can only be described as a full-court press campaign. She started showing up everywhere, my gym, my favorite lunch spot, even outside Noah's office, which I'm sure thrilled him to no end. Each time she tried a different tactic, like she was workshopping material for a one-woman Broadway show called How to Guilt Trip Your Son. The most ridiculous encounter happened at the coffee shop near my apartment. She came armed with photo albums from my childhood, sat herself down at the table next to mine, and started loudly reminiscing about the good old days, flipping through pictures and practically narrating my entire childhood for the whole cafe. "Oh, look, Ethan, here you are on your first day of kindergarten. And remember Christmas of '98? We all had matching sweaters. Wasn't that fun?" I sipped my coffee in silence, pretending I was invisible. When I finally got up to leave, she actually followed me to the parking lot, waving the photo album like it was Exhibit A in a trial. She said, "Why are you throwing away 29 years of family love over one bad day?" I stopped, looked her dead in the eye and said, "It wasn't one bad day, it was a lifetime of treating Liam like the golden child while I was the backup plan." She frowned, already gearing up for the rebuttal, and said, "We always loved you both equally." I laughed so hard I almost choked on my latte. "Right. And that's why when Liam crashed his car in high school, you bought him a new one. When I crashed my car, you both told me to get a job and buy my own." That was the moment the equal love argument completely collapsed under its own weight. The conversation got heated fast. She accused me of being jealous and vindictive, claiming I was punishing the entire family because I couldn't handle Liam being more successful with women. I nearly spit out my coffee. Successful with women? He's broke, alone, and currently in debt to Discover Card and probably his yoga instructor. Meanwhile, my supposed failures landed me a thriving business and actual self-respect. So tell me again who's winning here. That's when she dropped her trump card like she was holding the ace of spades. She said my father was having health problems and the stress of the family falling apart was making it worse. Classic manipulation tactic. I told her as much. She got red in the face and said I'd become cold and calculating, nothing like the son she'd raised. Honestly, I took that as a compliment. The son she raised would have caved by now. The week of Thanksgiving, the pressure campaign went from heavy to absurd. My grandmother called, crying about how this would be the first Thanksgiving in 60 years without the whole family together. Liam texted me photos of the table already set up, complete with my usual spot, name card and all, like I was just running late to my own humiliation. Even Uncle Mark got in on the action, calling to play mediator and suggesting we needed to move past everything for the sake of family unity. But the absolute peak of desperation came Thanksgiving morning. I was enjoying a peaceful breakfast in my apartment. Eggs, bacon, silence. When the doorbell rang at 8 a.m., I figured it was a neighbor or maybe a package. I looked through the peephole and there they were. The entire family. Parents, grandparents, Liam, aunts, uncles. The whole circus troupe. My father was holding flowers. My mother had what looked like a homemade apology cake, and Liam was wearing a suit like he was either going to church or his own sentencing hearing. They'd clearly coordinated this intervention. I opened the door, but I sure as hell didn't invite them in. My father immediately launched into his best CEO of the family impression, giving this speech about how we'd all made mistakes and how family was more important than pride. He said they'd been wrong to embarrass me, that they wanted to make it right, as if this was some Hallmark movie and not the same people who had laughed while my dignity was roasted and carved like a turkey 12 months earlier. My mother jumped in, voice trembling, talking about how much they missed me and how the holidays weren't the same without me. She was even crying, actual tears rolling down her face. Would have been moving if I hadn't grown up watching her turn on the waterworks whenever she wanted my dad to cave on buying a new sofa. The woman could have won an Oscar in the manipulative crying category, but Liam's contribution, oh, that was the real showstopper. He admitted right there in front of everyone that everything he'd achieved had been handed to him, while everything I'd accomplished, I'd earned. He said he'd been living in my shadow professionally for years, and the whole Thanksgiving humiliation was his desperate attempt to feel superior for once, which, by the way, he admitted while wearing a suit in my hallway, like he was about to argue his own incompetence in court. The conversation dragged on for almost an hour, with each family member taking turns like it was some kind of guilt-based talent show. My grandmother leaned hard on the legacy angle, talking about tradition and keeping the family together, as if the business was the crown jewels and not a construction company hemorrhaging clients. My father, looking more desperate by the minute, actually offered me full control of the family business if I had come back. Full control, after 29 years of being the spare tire in their family car. Here's what they still didn't get. This wasn't about business or money or even forgiveness. This was about respect. For 29 years, they treated me like the responsible backup son while Liam got to be the charming favorite. They enabled his failures, threw parades for his mediocrity, and expected me to quietly mop up his messes. When I finally spoke, I laid it out plain. Their apologies rang hollow because they weren't about remorse. They were about survival. They weren't sorry for humiliating me, for the years of favoritism, for the way they dismissed me. They were sorry that their golden boy had crashed and burned while their responsible backup plan had succeeded beyond their expectations. Liam tried to interrupt me, his voice cracking like a middle schooler in a choir recital, claiming he genuinely learned from his mistakes and wanted to be a better brother. I asked him point blank, "If Chloe hadn't left you broke and humiliated, would you have picked up the phone to apologize?" He froze, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. That silence was more honest than anything he'd said all night. My father, clearly tired of the group therapy session not going his way, slipped right back into his old authoritative tone. He puffed out his chest, jabbed a finger in the air, and told me enough was enough, and it was time to stop being stubborn. That was my moment of clarity. They still didn't get it. Even in their supposed apology, he was still trying to bark orders like I was the obedient son who'd dutifully roll over for a pat on the head. I told them I appreciated the effort, the cake, the flowers, the traveling circus of regret, but that some things can't be glued back together with buttercream frosting and chrysanthemums. The damage wasn't just the Thanksgiving humiliation. It was decades of being treated as less than, as the understudy to Liam's lead role. And when they showed me exactly how they really felt about me at that dinner table, I believed them the first time. The most satisfying moment came when my mother, teary-eyed and clutching her Kleenex like it was a hostage, asked what it would take for me to forgive them. I told her the fact she even asked that question proved she still didn't get it. This wasn't about them earning forgiveness like it was a punch card at a coffee shop. This was about me finally choosing not to waste any more energy on people who had never valued me properly. They shuffled out looking defeated, like a football team that had fumbled in overtime. But I saw it, that flicker of anger behind their eyes. My father's parting shot was that I'd regret this decision and that family was all that really mattered in the end. Liam muttered something about how success had changed me, made me heartless, which was rich coming from the guy who strutted shirtless into Thanksgiving like a bad soap opera villain. I spent Thanksgiving alone by choice, eating takeout and sketching out plans for our next business expansion. Noah texted me photos from his family dinner, warm smiles, people genuinely enjoying each other's company, and it hit me. Seeing actual healthy family dynamics only reinforced how toxic mine had always been. The crazy part is that I think they really thought their little Broadway performance would win me over. The flowers, the cake, the synchronized, apologetic sighs. It was like community theater meets family dysfunction. They actually believed I'd take one look at a daisy bouquet and say, "Wow, thanks guys." I guess those years of being the family's emotional punching bag don't matter anymore. The entitlement is Olympic level at this point, and I'll admit I was a little curious what trick they'd try next. They'd already gone through the greatest hits, guilt card, health scare card, and the grand gesture card. At this rate, the only thing left is the "we'll kidnap your dog until you love us again" card. I could practically see them flipping through the Manual of Manipulation 101, realizing they were running out of chapters, which meant they'd either finally accept that I was serious or, more realistically, double down and get nastier. Either way, I was prepared. Years of building my independence wasn't just about making money. It was about making myself bulletproof to their usual tactics. No more guilt, no more manipulation, no more being told that my worth depended on how useful I was to them. The best revenge isn't screaming at Thanksgiving. It's building a life so solid that their approval isn't even a rounding error in the equation. After they left my apartment that morning, life actually got quiet. No ambush visits, no passive-aggressive phone calls, no guilt-soaked voicemails about families sticking together. For a second, I thought, maybe they finally got the hint. But of course, that was me giving them way too much credit. They weren't gone. They were regrouping like a dysfunctional board of directors planning their next hostile takeover. And sure enough, by January, the smoke signals reached me. A couple of industry contacts casually mentioned they'd heard whispers, my father dropping little concerns about how Noah and I landed some of our biggest clients. Nothing specific, just slimy enough to raise eyebrows. Subtle stuff like, well, you know how ambitious Ethan can be. One wonders what corners he might cut. Classic dad. If you can't compete, smear. The thing is, the rumors didn't stick. Our work speaks for itself, and the only corners we've cut are on the celebratory cake slices after hitting our quarterly targets, but it told me everything I needed to know. They weren't just desperate anymore. They'd gone full hostile. In their minds, I wasn't the prodigal son waiting to come home with open arms. No, I'd upgraded roles. I was now the traitor who had betrayed the family. Liam's approach did a full 180. Gone were the pitiful little apology texts full of, please bro, forgive me. Suddenly, I was getting Shakespearean rants about how I destroyed the family because of my ego. One message literally said, "You're punishing all of us because you couldn't handle losing Chloe to me." I nearly choked on my coffee. The projection was so strong I half expected him to start charging rent for the space he was trying to occupy in my psyche. I wanted to reply, "Buddy, the only thing I lost was respect for you."
And that was years before Chloe realized your wallet was thinner than your hairline. But I didn't bother. Let him stew in his delusion soup. Meanwhile, my mother went full mastermind mode. Forget direct contact. She weaponized family gossip. Suddenly, distant relatives I hadn't spoken to since Y2K were ringing me up, saying things like, "Your poor mother tells us you've abandoned the family over a little prank." A prank, right? Because public humiliation and decades of favoritism is just a quirky little joke. What next? Liam lights my house on fire and they call it boys being boys. Some relatives actually tried to mediate, bless their hearts. That gave me the perfect chance to drop the truth bomb. I'd calmly explain what happened at Thanksgiving, and you could hear the horrified silence on the other end of the line. A few even admitted they'd noticed Liam getting the golden child treatment all along. It was like finally getting Yelp reviews to back up what I'd been saying for decades. 1 star would not recommend growing up in this family. But the breaking point, that came in March. Noah and I had just landed the biggest contract of our careers, bigger than anything my father's company had touched in 2 years. We're talking champagne-worthy, victory lap kind of deal. Word got back to the family almost instantly, because of course it did. I swear news travels faster among them than through actual press releases. That evening, Noah and I were out celebrating at a nice restaurant, laughing over how far we'd come. Then, like some kind of drunk soap opera villain, Liam stumbled in. His face was red, his shirt half untucked, and he was radiating the kind of bitter energy you could smell from across the room. He staggered up to our table and slurred, "You think you're better than me? You think landing some contract makes you the king?" Before I could respond, he escalated, yelling about how I'd stolen his life, how that client should have been his, and how I was nothing without the family name. The volume kept rising until management politely asked us to leave, by which I mean they basically threw us out. Out in the parking lot, Liam fully unleashed. He was waving his arms like an angry game show contestant who just lost the jackpot. "You stole everything from me," he shouted. "That success should have been mine. You're nothing, nothing without us." And there it was. The mask dropped completely. This wasn't about family reconciliation, love, or forgiveness. It wasn't about Thanksgiving. It was about Liam's inability to accept that I had succeeded where he'd failed. He'd spent his entire life being spoon-fed the idea that he was the golden boy destined for greatness,
while I was just the reliable background character. So watching me thrive while he struggled, it was like kryptonite to his ego. That parking lot meltdown wasn't humiliating for me. It was liberating. It confirmed what I'd known deep down. Their so-called reconciliation wasn't about love or healing or family unity. It was about getting me back in costume as the dutiful backup son, sweeping up Liam's wreckage while they clapped for his mediocrity. But here's where karma really strutted onto the stage. Over the next few months, the natural consequences of their choices came home to roost. The family business started bleeding clients faster than Liam bleeds dignity after 3 shots of tequila. 2 more major accounts bailed, fed up with his incompetence. Suddenly, the empire wasn't looking so imperial. My father had to lay off 3 employees, including his foreman of 15 years.
I heard about it through industry contacts, and one guy even said, "Your dad's been making decisions like a man trying to play poker with Uno cards." Ouch. Meanwhile, Liam's personal life was basically a reality show nobody asked for. He'd been living back in his childhood bedroom since Chloe pieced out, and apparently that was going about as well as you'd expect. My mother complained constantly about having her grown man-child stomping around, eating her leftovers and leaving socks on the floor, and Liam, shockingly, didn't enjoy being treated like a failure, even though, let's face it, the shoe fit like a custom Italian loafer. By May, he'd rebounded with someone new, Sophia, a waitress from a local restaurant. According to mutual acquaintances, Liam turned on the same tired routine. Promises he couldn't keep, a champagne lifestyle on a beer budget, flashing credit cards he probably couldn't pay off like a magician doing the same card trick for the 100th time.
Everyone could see where it was headed. Another spectacular implosion. Honestly, I almost felt bad for Sophia. Almost. Then came July. I ran into my grandmother at the grocery store. She looked older, more worn down than I remembered, the kind of tired that sits in your bones. When she saw me, I braced myself for the usual guilt trip, the teary-eyed speeches about family legacy and think of your poor mother, but it didn't come. No performance, no manipulation, no rehearsed lines. She just looked at me, her shoulders slumped, and for the first time she didn't try to fix, spin, or sell me anything. She just looked sad. She told me family dinners weren't family dinners anymore. They were boxing matches with side dishes. Liam was angry all the time, sulking like someone stole his juice box. And my parents spent most meals arguing about money and blame. She lowered her voice and said she finally understood why I'd stayed away. Watching the circus without me there to play ringmaster had opened her eyes to just how toxic the dynamics really were. That conversation hit me harder than I expected. It made me realize my absence hadn't just freed me from their dysfunction, it had exposed it. Without me in the role of responsible one, there was no buffer, no scapegoat, no fallback plan. They had to face themselves without me running interference. And shocker, they didn't like what they saw. By September, the industry grapevine was buzzing. My father was seriously considering selling the family business. Couldn't maintain profitability, they whispered. Too many lost clients, too much chaos from Liam's mismanagement. The empire was crumbling and not even duct tape and denial could hold it together. Meanwhile, Noah and I were thriving. 8 employees, a waiting list of potential clients, actual growth built on competence and integrity, not nepotism and who-you-know dinners. Our company wasn't just surviving, it was sprinting past the finish line while theirs tripped over its shoelaces. The final confirmation that this saga was done came last month. I was at an industry networking event, sipping a decent cocktail and minding my business when I spotted my father across the room. He looked different. Not just older, but defeated in a way that money, ego, or fake confidence couldn't patch over. Our eyes met. He gave a small nod. No speech, no guilt trip, no dramatic showdown. Just a quiet acknowledgement, like two poker players laying their cards down, both knowing the game was over. People sometimes ask if I feel guilty about how things turned out. The answer is simple: no. I didn't destroy their family, I just stopped propping it up. I didn't ruin their business, I stopped cleaning up Liam's messes. I didn't abandon them, I finally chose to prioritize my own well-being over their dysfunction. The 3 years since that infamous Thanksgiving dinner have been, without exaggeration, the best of my life. No surprise, ambushes with apology cakes, no late-night guilt trip voicemails, no brother trying to prove he's better by tanking both our reputations in public. Just peace, progress, and people who actually respect me. I've built a business that not only survived but thrived. I've developed real friendships, the kind where people invite you to dinner because they like you, not because they need you to co-sign their bad decisions. And for the first time in my life, I know what it feels like to be valued for who I am, not just for what I can clean up. Sometimes people ask me if I'd do anything differently. My answer: absolutely. I wish I'd grown a spine and drawn these boundaries years ago. Imagine how much time I could have saved if I'd stopped chasing approval from people who thought equal treatment meant buying Liam a new car while telling me to Uber. The only regret I carry is how much energy I wasted trying to earn love and respect from people who were simply not built to give it, for anyone else living with the same circus act of family dynamics. Here's my unsolicited advice: you can't change people who don't want to change. Believe me, I tried. Therapy sessions, heart-to-hearts, logic, sarcasm, nothing penetrated. But you can change how much access they have to your life. Lock the gates, raise the drawbridge, and enjoy the silence. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst behavior. I'm done now. Not because there isn't more drama, trust me, there's always more, but because I've finally reached the point where their chaos is background noise, irrelevant to my happiness. And that, more than any carefully plotted revenge fantasy, feels like the real victory